participants. In this module, we would be discussing certain developments in the field of media as well as media studies in the 21st century. The 21st century is also considered as an information era. We as human beings have an unparalleled approach towards media. We also have an unparalleled reliance upon media, internet and all other devices which are linked with it. Sometimes this epoch is also known as the third industrial revolution. If the second industrial revolution had been initiated with the use of computers and software, we find that the third industrial revolution has been generated by this combination and interconnectivity of internet, media and other linked devices. Because of these interlinks, we find that the boundaries between information and commerce as well as among other fields have become permeable. They are not stratified classifications in terms of activities. So, we find that on the one hand, we are using internet technology for online money transactions, for sales as well as for advertisements. We are also using the same media platforms for recruiting people, for providing a leadership role and skills to people. We are also using it for our entertainment. We are also using it for enhancing connectivity among people. And at the same time, with the help of various apps, we are also using the same technology for completing some household chores. So, we find that technology now has become a part of human existence in such a way that has been unprecedented. And at the same time, we find that basically this change has been brought about by the way we interact with each other, we communicate with each other. The media forms in the 21st century are different from the previous traditional media forms. We find that in our days, the traditional media forms are steadily declining, whether they are in the shape and form of print media, the radio or the television, and steadily also we find that there is a shift towards the new media. The new media is based on internet technology. It is also termed as a child of technological developments and advancements in various fields of computer based technology, information technology as well as communications technology. So, we can say that the new media or the media in the 21st century is a product of internet revolution, and at the same time it is also a product of a steady rise in the internet culture. New media landscape is networked, it is interconnected and open source. It is pertinent at this point to refer to a very interesting book by Lev Manovich. The title of this book is The Language of New Media. Published in the year 2001, we find that Manovich's book has been a path-breaking study in terms of looking at the ways the new media is developing, and at the same time we find that it has provided us with a terminology which was very much needed at this stage. Manovich's work defines the field of software studies, and at the same time it assesses the implications of the first generation of internet culture. An interesting aspect of this work is that it suggests that what we consider to be new media is in fact often rooted in transformation and rediscovery of, I quote, slumbering utopian energies of the past, unquote. So, he describes the history of the new media, and he also tries to systematically provide a context for it. He places the contemporary media within the visual and media cultures of the past few centuries. He also appreciates the creative possibilities of the new media forms and also acknowledges the transformation these new media forms have brought about in our culture. But at the same time, he claims that there is definitely a history behind the development of what we consider as the new media. In order to provide a theoretical grounding to his arguments, he has used concepts from myriad fields, including computer science, art history, film theory, as well as literary theory. Taking help from these varied fields, he has been able to develop new theoretical constructs. A particular problem which we come across when we look at the concept of the new media is to define it properly. The categories which are commonly discussed under this umbrella heading are internet, websites, computer multimedia, computer games, CD-ROMs, DVD, as well as virtual reality. So Manovich asks this question, is this all new media is? So he looks at the television programs which are shot on digital video and which have been edited using computer workstations. He also looks at the feature films which use 3D animation and digital compositing. So do we count these forms which are an intermingling of the previous media forms with the newer technology as new media or not? If we look at these experiments and these developments as a part of the new media, then how do we look at the images and text images compositions, including photographs, illustrations, layouts, advertisements, which are also created on computers and then may be printed on a paper later on. So where do we stop in our attempt to define the boundaries of what should be included within this umbrella heading of the new media? If we look at the previously listed examples and the questions which Manovich has asked, then we find that the popular definition of new media identifies it with the use of computer for distribution as well as for exhibition rather than with production. In a way, we can roughly suggest that the texts which are distributed on a computer can be considered as the new media. So the texts which are distributed using a computer, for example the websites, the electronic books, etc., should be a part of the new media. And on the other hand, the texts which are circulated and distributed on paper are not a part of the new media. Similarly, it can be suggested that photographs which are put on a CD-ROM and require a computer to view them should be considered as a part of the new media, whereas the same photographs, if they are printed in the form of books on a piece of paper, should not be considered as a part of the new media. So this is a rough definition with which Manovich starts working further, and immediately he is also able to identify the limitations inbuilt in this definition. Manovich suggests that today we are in the middle of a new media revolution, and at the same time he says that there is a considerable shift in our culture, because now we are looking at different forms of production, distribution and communication which are mediated by computers. And he compares this shift, this fundamental shift in our culture, because now we are doing everything with the help of a computer software. So he compares this fundamental shift with certain other previous cultural shifts which have taken place in human history. He compares them namely with two interesting developments, the development of the printing press and the development of the photography. So when he looks at the printing press, which was developed in the 14th century, he suggests that it affected only one stage of cultural communication, and that is the distribution of media. So we can also say that the print media had revolutionized the way people shared their information through newspapers and magazines. The other comparison he has drawn is with the development of photography in the 19th century. And Manovich further suggests that as print media had affected only one aspect of cultural communication, that is the distribution of media, in the same way he says that the photography also affects and is linked with only one aspect of cultural communication, and that is the aspect of producing still images. However, if we look at these two previous cultural shifts, the computer media revolution has affected all stages of communication, which includes acquisition of an information, manipulation of this information, storing this information, as well as distributing this information. So, whereas the previous cultural shifts had affected only one aspect of our cultural communication, new media revolution has affected all facets of cultural communication. At the same time, we find that the use of computers technology also affects other types of media: text, still images, moving images, sound, and special constructions are also taking the form of digitalization. Manovich has looked at the cultural history which lies behind the development of the idea of the new media, and he suggests that it represents a convergence of two separate historical trajectories, and that is computing and media technologies. Both these had started in the 1830s with two major scientific discoveries: the analytical engine of Babbage and daguerreotype of Daguerre. Eventually, it is during the middle of the 20th century that a modern digital computer is developed, and simultaneously we find that there is a rise in media technologies which allowed the storage of images, image sequence, sounds and text using different material forms. For example, it could be a photographic plate, it could be a film stock, it could be a gramophone record, etc. So, we find that the new media emerges when these two different developments are synthesized together. It resulted in a translation of all existing media into numerical data which could be accessed with the help of computers. So, we find that now we have a new media which includes graphics, moving images, sounds, shapes, spaces and text which are computable, which in fact is translatable as another set of computer data. So, according to Manovich, we find that it is the convergence of two separate historical trajectories which has resulted into the new media technologies. The idea that every technology is rooted in a particular historical time is pertinent even in the context of the new media. The earlier media has also been rooted in a particular period which had a particular condition of production and dissemination of knowledge. These conditions definitely were very different from today. Internet came across as a subversive medium. It revolutionized the media as well as its transformation into a spectacular playground in recent years. So, the revolutionary impulse of the first phase of web culture resulted in a breaking down of hierarchies, and we find that everything started shifting towards a digital space. It also ushered in new ways of looking at the world. We can also say that it is a product of the intellectual community which is devoted to the assessment and a critique of new media discussed on online forums like NetTime. It is reviewed prior to publication on, for example, Rhizome, which is an early email list. Alexander Galloway comments in this context that the language of new media was written for, within and against the new internet culture of the late 1990s. Manovich's book has been hailed by various theorists as being a path-breaking presentation and analysis of new media forms. It is interesting to refer to Galloway again here, who says that the new media may be defined via reference to a foundational language or a set of formal and poetic qualities identified across all sorts of new media objects, and indeed across historical and social context. We are required to think critically and historically because the digital is so structural, so abstract and so synchronic. So, we find that Manovich also looks at the digital technologies as poetic and aesthetic objects. He elaborates on the features, techniques, and the nature of the new technology in this book. In a particular section of the book, which has the title Principles of New Media with a question mark, Manovich offers 5 principles of digital media, and they are numerical representation, modularity, automation, variability, and cultural transcoding, which include properties of data and the ways in which information is produced, is stored, and is made intelligible to different audience. He also offers a number of statements that are now common in the discourse on digital media: a logic of selection, the importance of compositing, the way in which the database itself is a medium, the emphasis on navigation through space, the reversal of the relationship between syntagm and paradigm, the centrality of games and play, the waning of temporal montage, and the rise of spatial montage are some of the critical perspectives which have been introduced by Manovich in this book. Manovich has also described the new media as being cinematic. He also says that the visual culture of a computer age is cinematographic in its appearance, digital on the level of its material, and computational in its logic. So, this definition also incorporates the interconnectivity between various specializations of human knowledge. He also argues that the new media is fundamentally cinematic, and to understand its emergence, he advises that we should look back to different kinds of media that had preceded this particular new media. So, his new media follows the structure of what can be called as the mise en abîme, an outside that leads to an inside, which again leads to another inside, and on and on. So, we find that it is a very complex way of putting it across, but I think this is one of the best definitions of the new media. He also suggests that the new media follows an inherently historical methodology. It is also a fundamental change in the media landscape after the invention of cybernetics in the late 1940s. So, in our time, we have to look at media not as indexical, not as something pointing from here to there, but rather it has emerged as a synagogue, a part for the whole as well as a part of the whole. Different media critics have looked at the new media, this particular phenomenon, in different ways. Manovich has looked at the new media in terms of essentially software applications. Unlike Manovich, there are some critics who feel that it is not only the software but the hardware which is also equally, if not more, important. Prominent among these theorists are Kittler and Kwong Chun. At the same time, there are some critics, for example, Loving and Bink, who focus on the new forms of social interaction that media do or do not facilitate. At the same time, there are some critics who focus on networks of information rather than just personal computers, and these critics are Terranova and Eugene Thacker. So, we find that there are different responses to new media, different attempts to understand it as well as to define it. The words digital media as well as social media are sometimes interchangeably used. However, it is pertinent to look at these two phrases or words critically. Digital media is a set of complex and interconnected technologies that have fundamentally reconfigured the media landscape in the last few decades. So, digital media is preferred over competing terms like new media because it emphasizes the fundamental technical motivator of change, and the motivator of change is digitization of media content. So, when we talk about conversion of a content from analog to digital computer readable format, we normally prefer the term digital media. It is also related with an amplified communicative capacity, the question of bandwidth, etc., higher fidelity, and ability to easily assimilate content into computer networks such as the internet. It also makes information widely accessible and changes the way in which information is processed. So, we can say that the use of the phrase digital media highlights the content of digitization, the scope of digitization in the use of a particular media form. In comparison to that, we use social media in those contexts when we are talking about technologies which provide space for in-depth social interaction and community formation, as well as for tackling of collaborative projects. It can be considered as a subset of digital media and adds database capacity to communication to record and represent the social relationships between participants. We can put these platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, as well as Instagram, LinkedIn, and blog writing in our definition of the social media. The social media improves our communication with other social groups. It also helps us to create new communities which are based on shared and common interest. It also emulates offline social networks in an online manner. So, like the old media, digital and social media systems allow for communication, but digitization and networking technologies have definitely improved how individuals and communities can be brought closer. The idea of discoverability of knowledge and information and the concept of social cohesion are augmented through automation. There is also a shift in which people engage with media. There was a time when the readers or the audience used to be passive consumers, but now with the onset of the new technologies, we find that the users of the new media are becoming more and more interactive. And this is the main difference between the old and the new media forms. Whereas in the old media forms, the consumers had to be passive, they had to read something or they had to listen to something which is being projected before them. But the capacity to interact simultaneously is the major difference which the new media has brought out. The future vision of new media is also looked at in terms of convergence. In a situation where all digital media would be enclosed in an internet enabled system. Till now, digitization has created a hybrid media system. Technologies for specific purposes are being turned into systems with a wide range of applications. For example, there is a shift in the utility of computers, and we have switched over from the typewriters or calculators to computers. And at the same time, we find that the previous systems of entertainment and communication through telephone etc. are also being substituted by the digitalized version of a computer. So, conversion of offline and online digital content via social media or technical means would result into a creation of online communities around TV shows. So, up till now we are in a phase where the new media has generated a hybrid system, but very soon media theorists are looking into the future and they are terming it as a convergence. This particular slide suggests how different people consume news in the age of new media. If we look closely at this chart, we find that there is a direct connection between the age group of the users, the consumers, and the type of media they normally prefer. We can find that the 80% users who are in the bracket of 18 to 24 years of age, who are young in age, are dependent on the online media platforms. However, people who are elderly shift towards the traditional ways of print and TV in order to look at the news, to be familiar with the latest news developments. So, we find that the technological comfort as well as the concept of being organically related with the age in which we are born has something to do with our media preferences. We can look at the rapidly growing number of internet users across the world, and we can also say therefore that social media has been a game changer as far as communication and networking efforts are concerned. Normally our day begins with the social media, and this is also our last consumption. At the same time, as the previous slide has suggested, each platform has its own unique customer base. Depending on the age as well as the occupation of the people, people look for a particular type of social media platform. For example, very young people may opt for technologies like Snapchats, etc., whereas people who are in serious businesses and in serious professional profiles would still prefer a LinkedIn profile. So, we find that each platform may have its own unique customer base, but at the same time the connectivity allows people to create a certain voice for their sentiments and feelings, and at the same time the social media now has the capability to create movements. It has resulted into a sense of growing activism because people can pass on their ideas very quickly to each other. But at the same time, we find that there are certain pockets in the world where the reach of the new media, the digital media as well as the social media, is limited. In some countries, it may be because of the political power systems. For example, in those countries where we do not have democracy, there may be some or the other form of censorship, and therefore people would not be able to approach the social media platforms without restrictions. And at the same time, there are still certain pockets where, because of the technological or socio-economic lack of development, people's reach to these new media forms is limited. But still we can say that it has been major game changer, as we had seen earlier. The participation on the part of people is also viewed differently by theorists. Still there are some people who think that people may still be passive recipients of media messages, and they trust what they are looking at, and this aspect is still a matter of ongoing debate. People who believed in this theory look at the general public as being rather simpleton, uninformed, naive, and prone to manipulation. On the other hand, other critics feel that the audience today is more discerning, they are better educated, they are more engaged, and they are also selective in filtering as well as absorbing media messages. Most of the debates around the effects of media boil down to political discourse over use of media, socio-political agendas, question of political representation, and formation of public opinion. Digital media and new media adds to the diversity of media sources and content. It allows us to look at how technological changes impact the manner in which audiences participate in new media landscapes. The new forms of media has also brought about various social changes in our contemporary culture. It has also resulted into ongoing debates over propaganda and active user engagement in public policy as well as in political discourses. A new phrase which has been coined in this context is the media hype, which is an effect of interaction between media consumers and producers and the fluid boundaries in the 21st century. Digital technology has expanded the choices and vistas for educated and well informed citizens, and at the same time it has also affected life choices of those people who may not have an equal measure of access to the new technologies. Convergence of network technology and media has altered the ability of individuals to act and participate within the media system. So, there are challenges when we have to look at the boundaries or the categories which define audience and producers, because the audience is despite the opinion of certain media critics, is not passive in the traditional sense, and even those people who may be more naive in comparison have the capability to produce their own media content. It is also linked with the expression of human creativity in innovative and novel ways, and it can also be said that these ways are proving to be more effective in comparison to the traditional ways. Incorporation of ICTs into the media system does not just provide channels, it also provides a platform for engagement. For example, shift from dumb communications technology to the smart digital media. At the same time, there are certain pitfalls also. For example, there are issues about the surveillance, the electronic surveillance of people and loss of privacy, or sharing of user information without seeking prior permission of the user, etc. However, we find that the reach of the networking sites, the social networking sites, has grown phenomenally. If we look at the motivations for using social networking sites, we find that people use them for different purposes. They use it for staying in touch with the current friends, to stay in touch with their family members, to connect with friends with whom they had lost their contact, to have certain connectivity with those people who share the same hobbies and interests, as well as to create new friends, or reading comments by celebrities, athletes, or politicians. A significant number is also using these social networking sites for finding potential romantic or dating partners. So, we find that the motivations for using social networking sites may be different. However, the people are using it more and more. It is changing the communication pattern of the people very effectively. This is also proved by the percentage of the population which is using the social media now. In this chart, we find that the percentage of US population who have been using social media from the year 2008 to 2017 has been depicted. From a meager percentage of 24 in 2008, we find that within a decade, almost 81% of the people are using the social media. In almost every other country of the world, there is a duplication of this particular percentage. So, we can say that new media has affected the way we communicate, and therefore, it has also affected the way we look at our contemporary culture and internalize its values. Manovich has dubbed the new media as a new kind of computer and human interface. The logic of the new media corresponds to the post-industrial logic of production on demand, and just-in-time delivery with themselves were made possible by the use of computers and computer networks in all stages of manufacturing and distribution. So, here we find that the use of the term culture industry becomes much more pertinent, because it is the culture industry which is actually ahead of the rest of the industry in using the social media or the new media. It is interesting to note that it is culture industry in the 21st century which is actually ahead of the rest of the industries. The term culture industry was originally coined by Theodore Adorno in the 1930s, almost a century before, and he had used this term to look at how the consumerist behavior increased in the society when media houses as well as the capitalist market had joined forces. Interestingly, it is the use of the same term which helps us to understand the significance of the new media today. Thank you.